Hi everyone, I'm Isabella and I'm a Senior Programme Director working in the Cell Therapy series at Hanson Wade. This year, I'm Programme Director for the 9th CAR-TCR Summit, which will be returning in September from the 17th to the 20th. And this year, our mission is to achieve safe and successful clinical translation across oncology and autoimmune diseases, with automated and streamlined manufacturing processes to reinvigorate investment within the cell therapy community. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Matt Hewitt, who's Vice President and Technical Officer for Cell and Gene Therapy and Biologics at Charles River Laboratories, who'll be presenting and partnering with this year's meeting. I'm excited to learn more about his perspective on the cell therapy space at the moment and a little more about Charles River's work in this area. Before we get into that, Matt, please can I ask you to introduce yourself and tell me briefly about your work at Charles River?
No, thank you, Isabella, and appreciate you inviting me to do this, and the organizers at Hanson Wade for putting on the meeting, in September. So yes, as you said, I'm the technical officer for Cell and Gene and Biologics here at Charles River. Joined about 3 years ago from another CDMO, and about three years ago, Charles River seriously jumped into the CDMO space to complete what we now call the Concept to Cure portfolio for advanced therapies. So we can take a program which is more or less an idea or a concept and then run it through all of the different activities that are needed for preclinical CRO through CDMO and manufacturing, from research through early phase clinical, late phase clinical, and then commercial. And then we also provide the testing services that go along with that. So we do provide a true end-to-end, as in from start of a program to commercialization of a program for any advanced therapy, including cell therapies. We have several sites throughout the US and in the UK which do this work in CDMO. And our cell therapy site, which sits in Memphis, Tennessee, does commercially produce 2 cell therapies. One of the commercial products is allogeneic, and the other is autologous. The autologous product has been identified via press release, so we are one of the manufacturers for Vertex's Casgevy product.
Okay. And to start, what do you believe are the biggest challenges faced by those developing advanced therapies?
Yeah, I mean, this is a key question that we are always grappling with in the space. I think the primary challenge is that this field is still evolving rapidly. And so we are always at the tip of the spear, so to speak, when we are doing therapeutic development, when we're doing clinical trial design. And so we have to really make sure that we are working collaboratively with our partners to advance these programs and ensure that we have early and often contact with the relevant regulators, regardless of whether it's here in the US and we're talking to FDA, whether we're talking with, say, MHRA in the UK, or whether we're talking with the European Medicines Agency in Europe, as an example. So, I mean, I think those are the key things that that we want to do. We have seen that there are delays with these programs many times because the regulators have additional questions. Many times these additional questions are focused on analytical rather than process necessarily. So we do want to make sure that we are focused on these pain points or these challenges that we know exist in the space, so that we can present a package to our partners that they can then work with the FDA or relevant regulator to provide a streamlined path into commercial.
Okay. And what do you think have been the most exciting research or manufacturing breakthroughs within the advanced therapy space in the last 12 months?
Yeah, I mean, I think several things on the research side that we continue to see. I think we have moved from autologous therapies. We continue to work on developing allogeneic therapies in an effort to create therapies that can address a larger patient population from a more efficient manufacturing perspective. I don't think that we're necessarily giving up by any means on the autologous, because we know those therapies work. We're continuing to develop new technologies, and I think that's one of the most exciting pieces in the last 12 months, is that we are seeing multiple technologies come to market. At one of the conferences that's coming up this summer, we're seeing several new manufacturing platforms that focus on closed automated manufacturing launch. We're seeing other advances in robotics that are coming. I think on the therapeutic side and development as well as clinical, we're starting to see the first generation, if you will, of in vivo cell therapy. So, dosing LNPs into humans and then generating these cell therapies within a patient. I think the other piece that I will highlight from the regulatory side is that we now have the platform technology designation, which is available to folks. We also have the advanced manufacturing technology designation available, folks, to here in the US. And I think those as well will be quite exciting for the field because it presents new tools that we can use to advance therapies.
And Matt, why do you think cell therapies are so important?
I mean, cell therapies are important because there are certain indications where we just haven't gotten to the point yet where we can dose in vivo to address them. I think right now that's true for all therapies. Maybe at some point we will move beyond cell therapy where we need to take the cells out of the body and modify them and put them back in. This is a common discussion point in many of our panels. Just talking about it last week with a colleague who runs a manufacturing facility in DC. We were debating the in vivo versus the ex vivo, and he was making the point quite well that taking these cells out of the body, removing those stimuli that the cells are used to isn't necessarily going to be beneficial, which I completely agree with. Right now, though, again, what we're focused on is what works for patients, because at the end of the day, we at Charles River, and I know virtually everywhere else that does this work, the patient is at the center of the journey here. And so we need to consider what's best for the patient. And so we're going to go with what works. I think that we can continue to invest, and we should continue to invest as a field into new technologies and new therapeutics. But ultimately, what dictates whether or not those therapies will succeed and advance to a commercial state is going to be, the data that we get from patients. And so we need to center ourselves around that and ensure that we continue to keep the patient, straight in front of us.
Yeah, of course. And how do you see the space evolving over the next 36 months?
That's a good question. I mean, so we, this last year in 2023, we had 8 commercial approvals in the US via FDA. Prior to that, we had, I think, 8 in the prior 5 years, if we include the approval since 2017. So I'm somewhat excluding Libera and Provenge. But if we include the ones from 2017 to end of 2022, we had 8 approvals. 2023, we have 8 approvals, so we double the number of approvals. This year, we've already had 4 approvals here in the US. We could have up to another 6. So we could be getting to the point where we're starting to see double digits approved in cell and gene or advanced therapeutics. I think what that's going to bring into focus as well is that we really have to figure out how to scale these therapies. We have cell therapies in multiple myeloma, which are second line. And in the US alone, they have well over 100,000 addressable patients per year in that population. We have to figure out a way to do it. There are several stats that we report on and I present, and we'll probably present at the meeting again just to highlight, this situation where, in the beginning of 2023, Christy Shaw, who's the former CEO of Kite, did an interview with McKinsey where she talked about the fact that only about 2 out of every 10 patients which are eligible for Kite's commercial therapies actually receive them. And so that speaks to the fact that they're just not able to cope with the demand. They continue to grow the number of doses. Kite produced about 4,200 doses in cell therapy last year, which was, the most that anybody did. And then when there was another survey that looked at 17 clinical centers here in the US and the ability for patients to obtain commercial CAR-T therapy. And then what they found was the median wait time for a CAR-T therapy was about 6 months for a commercial therapy. Only 25% of those eligible actually received a commercial CAR-T therapy. Another 25% went on to a different CAR-T or cell therapy clinical trial. And the remaining 50% either went into a different trial or they unfortunately went to hospice and passed away. So, we have a significant portion of the population
that we're trying to address, which still can't access these therapies. And if we look at the spend on cell therapy globally, there's a report out from IQVIA at the beginning of 2024 looking at this, and the slope of that line is extremely steep in terms of spend. And to me, what it says is that the slope of that spend, in addition to these surveys and interviews, strongly suggests that we are not limited by the patient adoption. We are limited solely by the physical number of doses that we can produce to address these to address these patient populations. So the focus for me for the next 36 months, looking at the commercial space specifically, is we have to figure out how to appropriately scale the manufacturing of these therapies. And I think we need to take an above all the above approach, where we say, additional, closed manufacturing, decentralized manufacturing, which is another hot topic in the space. I mean, FDA has been talking about it for almost a year now. The MHRA has been talking about it. The EMA has been talking about it. This is something that a lot of people are talking about. It's actually, to some degree, something we're already doing here at Charles River. So we have a decentralized testing offering that we call Right Source, where we essentially put one of our testing locations at the site with a client, with our people. It's under our quality oversight, so it's under central quality oversight. We bring in our systems, our SOPs, our procedures, and then we run the tests. And to me, this is really decentralized manufacturing 1.0, because we're doing the testing and then we can add the manufacturing later. But the point is we have the same principle, and we have several of these sites in the US as well as in the UK, where we are supporting release for things like biologics, as well as, we have a site at the CHT Catapult in Stevenage. So, this is something that's going to happen, and we have to take the all the above approach to address this intense critical need that we have in this patient populations.
And why do you think it's important for pharma, biotech, and academia to come together at this summit?
I think it's critical that, we get an all of the above approach. I mean, I've worked in this space for probably longer than I want to admit by now. And I've worked in academia, I've worked in industry, I've worked in now CDMO for a number of years. And, a lot of the development, I mean, there's massive amounts of development that are happening across the industry. And so I don't want to necessarily say that one is dominant over the other, but at least the perception is, and I think it's still somewhat true, that a lot of this early development in the advanced therapy space is done in academia, and they are important innovators for us. And so we need to continue to work with them to make sure that we have insight into the latest developments in the space. We need to, the biotechs a lot of time are working to do some of the more riskier science, and they are funded generally by venture capital. So they're very dependent upon that type of cycle. And then the large pharma does their own development, but they also do a lot of, partnerships and acquisitions themselves. So I think there's a really good story there about how we work together to make sure that these therapies come from a small development setting into something that into a company that can actually commercialize them on a global scale. I would also point out on the academic side that a lot of times we are using academic sites for our early phase clinical activities, and sometimes for the manufacturing activities. So we cannot discount them. We can't only hold those academics accountable just for that early phase development work. We also have to do it for, early phase clinical. And those clinicians in those settings are absolutely critical to getting buy-in from them to give us the patients we need to develop the next generation of therapies. And they are critical because they are the front line of this battle against whatever we're going against, whether it be oncology or autoimmunity or sickle cell disease, which is a particularly debilitating indication that now has 2 approved therapies for. We need to work with everybody. I think we have done a really great job on doing that on a program by program basis. The hope that the field has is that we can start to put, multiple programs together to get a better understanding of what works and what doesn't work in the future.
Okay. And why is it an exciting time for Charles River to be part of this community?
I mean, who doesn't want to be involved and some of the most exciting areas in science. I mean, I think that that is that's what we do. We want to bring the expertise that we've built over decades. We want to build relationships with our partners and clients, um, to make sure that we have all the tools that are necessary for today as well as in the future. I mean, we have various different initiatives that we feel are very significant for this field. Outside of manufacturing, we have significant expertise on the analytical side, which we covered is one of the pain points in this field. We have significant expertise in, sourcing cells, because I always joke, not really joke, but joke that it's very difficult to do cell therapy without cells. Our preclinical expertise, we know through decades of experience what the FDA is looking for when you submit a preclinical IND package to them to open your clinical trial. We now have the legitimacy in having been inspected multiple times by multiple agencies, and we'll continue to successfully pass those audits is the goal for us. And I mean, I think, we have a lot of expertise, and we do all this because we want to see these therapies get into patients. We want to see them get out to the commercial market and help people. I mean, that's why we do what we do. I mean, we want to see these get into patients and get out and help people.
And what is the next goal or objective for Charles River?
That's a very good question. I guess we could always go with world domination in all therapeutic spaces, but I think, that's certainly later. I think we want to be, obviously the top partner for therapeutic developers in all modalities, including advanced therapies. And I do think we have the most complete portfolio in the world to do that. Specifically within advanced therapeutics, I think one of the things that we're focused on is making sure that we have the proper scale and network for manufacturing analytics to serve these populations as well as the programs. The other thing that we're doing is we recently announced initiatives where we're looking to further reduce the use of animals in development of these programs and other programs like it. So bringing on new alternative methods, we're working collaboratively with the regulators on what are some of the methods that we can bring as potential substitutes for this. As one example for that, we are pushing forward very heavily into virtual control groups for a lot of our animal studies for the GLP safety toxicology part of development. We are publishing a peer-reviewed paper on this. It's hopefully by the time this interview comes out, we can say that it has been published and we can share it. We will be looking to start, the first few studies this year where we do use virtual control groups instead of control animals. This will have a major impact on, both the speed and the cost of these studies, and further reduce our dependence on animals. We want to balance, dependence on animals with continued safety of products going into clinic. But we are working quite diligently to see where we can further reduce the animal use in this space, for various parts of preclinical activities.
Well, that sounds really exciting. And why were you interested in getting involved in the CAR-TCR summit in Boston?
Yeah, I mean, so I've been involved with this summit again for a long time, and I've seen it grow, and it's been, very rewarding to watch. What started off as a fairly small niche meeting now become, a top meeting in the space where everybody has to be. So I think because, Hanson Wade has worked diligently to build that reputation for this meeting, it's also become a gathering place for those of us in the field to meet and to discuss, what we're doing, hopefully what's coming next in the field, and then presenting opportunities to network with each other and make connections. And again, as we talked about in the prior, question, I think that's got to be the focus of a lot of these conferences, is making these connections amongst different folks in the field so we can advance therapies more quickly and more efficiently.
And what are your highlights on the agenda? What are you most looking forward to?
I mean, it's always hard to pick and this is one of the other potential downsides of growing in the way that it has, because I have so many interests in the different streams that it's hard to bounce around. I've always enjoyed the more intimate settings of the pre-conference workshops because it gives us more opportunity to discuss. We generally go into some more of the early stage developments that are in the field, like kind of next gen. I think we still do that within a lot of the streams. I mostly get consumed, obviously, in the manufacturing and regulatory side because that's where we do play a lot, and that's those sandboxes. But I do also come back to the clinical streams as well because, again, I'd like to see the impact of our work, as I do think everybody does. You know, we want to see this translate into something that will help patients. But I can't discount. I mean, so if I have to pick the top two, it's probably manufacturing and regulatory, but I don't think there's necessarily a stream that I would say I'm not interested in. It's really dependent upon the time that I have available to go to these sessions.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. And I know I'm looking forward to it too. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me today, Matt. It was super interesting to learn more about the valuable work that you're doing in the cell therapy space at Charles River. To everyone listening, the 9th CAR-TCR Summit returns in September. So if you're interested in attending or learning more from Matt and the rest of our expert speaker faculty, simply follow the link on the screen to learn more. Thank you again, Matt.
Thank you.